I entered the courthouse a condemned woman, drowning in camera flashes and headlines that had already judged me guilty. My husband wore a winner's smile while his mother sat like a queen on her throne. Their lawyer tapped a file of $92,000 worth of forged evidence on the table. They were certain I was finished. But the judge was about to ask one question that would turn their victory into ice. My name is Claire Whitaker, and today, at 38 years old, I was walking to my own public execution. The marble floors of the Bryan County Courthouse felt cold beneath my feet, the sound of my heels echoing through the high-arched ceilings of Crescent Harbor. I had chosen my outfit with surgical precision, a simple, charcoal gray wool suit that lacked the sharp, intimidating edges of my usual CEO attire. My hair was pulled back slightly too loosely, and I had intentionally skipped the concealer under my eyes. It was a look of calculated exhaustion, designed to fit the narrative the internet had already built for me. Outside the heavy oak doors of the courtroom, the wolves were already howling. A pack of independent reporters and influencers held their phones high, their faces illuminated by the eerie blue glow of several dozen simultaneous live streams. I caught a glimpse of one screen where a headline scrolled in aggressive red text, "Jealous billionaire attacks colleague, abuse of power and violence." The digital jury had already delivered their verdict at 2 o'clock this morning while I was staring at the ceiling of my empty bedroom. As I entered the room, the air seemed to vanish. Grant Holloway, the man I had shared my bed and my secrets with for nearly 10 years, sat at the front table. He was holding the hand of his mother, Judith Holloway. They looked like a portrait of noble grief and quiet betrayal. Grant didn't look like a man who had spent the last 3 years systematically draining my trust. He looked like a saint who had survived a hurricane. Their lawyer, Caleb Price, slammed a thick stack of folders onto the table with a thud that sounded like a coffin lid closing. Grant leaned in as I passed his table to reach my seat. His voice was a jagged, theatrical whisper intended for the microphones nearby. "Claire, please, just sign the papers and end this. Don't make everything so much worse for yourself than it already is." Judith didn't even look at me. She kept her chin high, her voice carrying just enough for the front row of the gallery to hear every word. This girl was always a liar. It was only a matter of time before she finally snapped. I sat down beside my own counsel, my eyes fixated on the opposing table. Caleb Price was holding a small, matte black flash drive and a color-printed copy of a protection order that looked far too official for something so new. I caught a glimpse of the bottom right corner of that document, a tiny, irregular smudge near the notary seal that didn't belong there. My heart didn't skip a beat. Instead, it grew remarkably cold. I looked away quickly, pretending I was too broken to notice a thing. "All rise." The bailiff announced. Judge Maren Klein entered the room. She was a woman known for her ironclad adherence to the law and a legendary lack of patience for theatrics. The room went silent, the tension tightening until it felt like a wire ready to snap. Everyone in the gallery was leaning forward, waiting for the moment I would be publicly nailed to the cross by my own husband. Caleb Price wasted no time. He stood up, his voice booming with practiced indignation as he presented his opening. He painted a picture of me that I barely recognized. According to him, I was a tyrant, a woman who threatened employees, manipulated company security, and forged financial documents to hide my own mental instability. He played a grainy 30-second video clip on the monitors. It showed me standing over a crying woman in a hallway, my arm raised, my face contorted in what looked like pure rage. It was a masterpiece of selective editing. The judge watched the screen with a neutral expression, then looked down at the physical folder Caleb had submitted as Exhibit A. She began flipping through the pages of the protection order. She stopped at one page for exactly 3 seconds too long. I watched her eyes move across the text, then back to the seal at the bottom. The corner of her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. The room stayed breathless. Caleb was still talking about the emotional trauma my husband had endured at my hands. Suddenly, Judge Klein slammed the folder shut. She put her pen down with a sharp, metallic click that silenced the entire room. She looked up, her gaze piercing Caleb Price like a needle. "Mr. Price, before we go any further, I want you to answer one question." Everything froze. Grant's fake look of concern turned into a mask of stone. Caleb's mouth stayed open for a split second, his confidence faltering. And I just sat there, the only person in the room who knew exactly why the air had just run out of the courtroom. The morning light over Crescent Harbor was as cold and sharp as a razor blade. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, the bay looked like a sheet of gray steel, indifferent to the rot growing inside these walls. Grant stood before the mahogany vanity, adjusting the knot of his silk tie with the practiced precision of a man who believed he owned the world. I sat on the edge of the bed, folding his laundered shirts with the quiet, rhythmic movements of a ghost. To him, I was just a fixture of the house, as silent and functional as the designer furniture. "I need you to move $92,000 into the Juniper Consulting account before noon today," Grant said, not bothering to look at me. His reflection was busy admiring his own jawline. "They are a critical contractor for the expansion project. Don't be late with it." I paused, my fingers smoothing the cotton of a sleeve. That is a lot of money for a consulting firm I have never seen a report from. "Grant, could you show me the invoices first?" He turned then, his eyes darkening with a familiar, condescending heat. He took 2 steps toward me, looming over where I sat. "Invoices. Claire, you don't understand how the real world works. You have spent your entire life protected by your father's name. You are just a figurehead. Honey, you are here to be the face, to look pretty at the galas, and to sign the checks I tell you to sign. Leave the business to the people who actually know how to build something." My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my face a mask of dull obedience. "I see," I whispered, before I could say another word. His phone chimed on the nightstand. It was Judith. He put it on speaker as he gathered his cufflinks. "Grant, darling." Her voice trilled through the room, sharp and demanding. "I need you to remind that wife of yours that my country club membership fees are due. It is $7,500, and tell her to stop being so difficult about the gardening budget. Honestly, Grant, if she put half as much effort into giving me a grandchild as she does into hoarding her father's pennies, we might actually be a real family." Grant smirked, catching my eye in the mirror. "I will handle it. Mother, Claire is just being sensitive today." "Sensitive. She's hollow." Grant, a hollow woman. Judith spat before hanging up. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply stood up and walked toward the jewelry box on my dresser. I reached for the velvet-lined compartment where I kept my mother's sapphire ring, the only thing I had left of her. My heart stopped. The slot was empty. "Grant," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "My mother's ring is gone. It was here last night." He didn't even flinch. He just shrugged as he headed for the door. "You probably dropped it somewhere. You have been so scattered lately. Claire, maybe you should check the trash. I have a meeting at 9 o'clock. Don't forget that transfer." The click of the front door was the sound of a key turning in a lock. I stood in the silence of the empty penthouse, the coldness finally reaching my bones. They weren't just stealing my money anymore. They were stripping away my soul, piece by piece. I walked into the walk-in closet and pushed aside a row of heavy silk gowns. Hidden behind the cedar paneling was a small biometric safe. The code wasn't Grant's birthday or our anniversary. I punched in 10/14/1988, the day the Whitaker Ridge Trust was officially incorporated. The door hissed open. Inside was a secondary encrypted phone and a thin manila folder. I pulled out a printed list of wire transfers I had been quietly tracking for months. Every single one of them led back to Juniper Consulting LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware. managed by a name I had finally linked to Grant's private mistress. I picked up the secure phone and typed a single line to Elena Ward, my private counsel. Activate Plan Hushglass. Today. Then. I dialed another number. It was picked up on the first ring. Rafe, I said to my head of security, I am going to the office. I need you with me, but stay in the shadows. Do not move until I give you the signal. I spent the next hour in the kitchen, preparing a lunch for Grant. I poached the salmon exactly how he liked it and paired it with the expensive white wine he preferred. It was a perfect, dutiful meal. As I set the table, I realized I wasn't cooking for my husband. I was laying out the last supper for a man who was already dead to me. Every plate I set was a piece of evidence. Every glass I polished was a preparation for the trial that would burn his world to the ground. I looked at the clock. It was 10:30. The game was finally beginning. I arrived at the glass and steel monolith of Atlas Vale Innovations at 11:45. I wore scuffed flats and a beige cardigan that had seen better years, clutching a grease-stained brown paper bag in my hands. I looked small. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like the woman Grant and his mother had spent months convincing the world I was. I was the unstable wife, the shadow of a woman who couldn't handle the pressure of her husband's success. As I crossed the lobby, the air shifted. The receptionists didn't stand up or offer the usual professional smile. Instead, they leaned in toward each other, their whispers carrying easily over the polished marble floors. "Is that really her?" one girl muttered, not even trying to hide her phone as she tilted it toward me. "The CEO's wife looks like a delivery person. How embarrassing." A young intern by the elevators held his phone at chest level, the red light of a recording app blinking. I kept my head down, letting my hair fall over my face to hide the cold, calculating clarity in my eyes. I needed them to see a victim. I needed them to document every second of this. "Well, look what the cat dragged into my lobby," a voice rang out, dripping with artificial sweetness. Sloane Bishop, the chief operating officer and the woman Grant had been funneling my family's money to, strutted toward me. She was dressed in a silk dress that cost at least $4,000 a garment paid for by the very trust she was helping to rob. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes scanning my messy appearance with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Claire, darling, you really shouldn't have come here," Sloane said, her voice raised just enough to ensure the growing crowd heard her. "You look so desperate. It is pathetic, really. Why are you still clinging to a life that clearly doesn't want you anymore? You are a clinger, Claire, a ghost in your own home." She reached out and snatched the brown paper bag from my hands. "Is this what you do now, playing the little housewife to feel relevant?" She tilted the bag intentionally, letting the poached salmon and sauce spill out. It splashed across my white blouse, the orange oil staining the fabric. Then, with a sharp flick of her wrist, she swiped the phone I was holding out of my hand. It skittered across the stone floor, the screen cracking with a sickening pop. I stood there, motionless, making sure the intern's camera caught the stain on my chest and the debris of my humiliation. I looked past her. Grant was standing near the glass doors of the executive suite, maybe 25 feet away. He didn't move to intervene. He didn't offer a word of defense for the woman he had promised to protect for a lifetime. He just watched, his arms crossed over his chest, a faint, cruel smile playing on his lips. He gave Sloane a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. It was a cue to finish me off. Sloane stepped into my personal space, her breath smelling of expensive mints and arrogance. "Grant is done with you, Claire," she hissed, her voice dropping to a jagged whisper. "The whole world is done with you. You are nothing." Then, her hand swung. The slap was loud, a sharp, stinging crack that echoed through the silent lobby. My head snapped to the side. The pain was real, but the satisfaction blooming in my chest was far more powerful. I had my assault. I had my public record of her violence. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. Before she could raise her hand again, a shadow moved from the edge of the crowd. Rafe Calder appeared in an instant. He didn't strike her. He didn't have to. With a single, fluid motion, he caught Sloane's wrists and rotated them behind her back, locking her in place with the terrifying efficiency of a man who had spent a decade in special operations. Sloane let out a startled, high-pitched yelp. "Let me go, you! You are hurting me! Grant, do something! This brute is attacking me!" At that exact moment, a jet-black SUV pulled directly up to the glass entrance, its tinted windows reflecting the chaos of the lobby. The driver, a man in a crisp suit I had hired through the Whitaker Ridge Trust, stepped out and opened the heavy glass doors. He didn't glance at Grant or the struggling COO. He walked straight to me and bowed his head. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, his voice deep and formal. "The board of directors is assembled. The private conference room is ready for your arrival. Your counsel is waiting." The lobby went so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The intern lowered his phone, his face turning a sickly shade of white. Grant's smug expression didn't just fade, it vanished, replaced by a gray, hollow mask of shock. He looked like a man who had just realized the victim he had been toyed with was actually the person holding the lease to his life. I didn't look at Sloane as she whimpered in Rafe's grip. I didn't look at the mess on my blouse. I looked Grant Holloway straight in the eyes with a gaze that told him our marriage was a transaction that had just reached its final, ugly expiration date. "The game is over, Grant," I whispered, though I knew he couldn't hear me from that distance. I turned and walked toward the private elevator, leaving the man who thought he had destroyed me standing in the wreckage of his own arrogance. It was time to pull the curtain back on the source of everything he thought he owned. The conference room of Whitaker Ridge Holdings was a cathedral of glass and silence. I sat at the head of the 30-foot obsidian table, the very seat my father had occupied for 40 years. Elena Ward, my lead counsel, sat to my left, her face as unreadable as a stone carving. She didn't look like a lawyer. She looked like a surgeon preparing for a difficult but necessary amputation. "The forensic lock is active as of 10 seconds ago," Elena said, her voice low and clinical. "Every email he sends, every calendar invite he deletes, and every dollar he attempts to move from any company-linked account is being mirrored and logged on a secure server. He is currently operating in a digital cage, and he has no idea the door has been locked." The heavy double doors at the end of the room flew open with a bang. Grant marched in. His face flushed a deep, ugly purple. He was panting, his expensive suit jacket disheveled from the scuffle in the lobby. He didn't see the trap. He only saw the woman he thought he could still intimidate. "What is this?" "Claire," he hissed, slamming his palms onto the table. "You think you can just march into my office after your little stunt downstairs. You are unstable. I have people recording your every move. You are finished." Elena calmly slid a single sheet of paper across the obsidian surface toward him. It was a formal revocation of his executive authority. Grant grabbed the document, his eyes darting over the legal text for only a moment before he let out a guttural noise of derision. He began tearing the paper into tiny, jagged pieces, throwing them into the air like confetti. "This means nothing," he screamed. "I am the CEO of Atlas Vale. I built that brand." Elena didn't blink. She didn't even lean back. "Tearing the paper doesn't tear the reality." Grant. "Atlas Vale Innovations is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Whitaker Ridge Trust. You don't own the chair you are standing behind. You were an appointee. You have been borrowing that seat for 3 years, and your lease ended exactly 5 minutes ago when Ms. Whitaker signed the removal order." Grant's hands began to shake. "Claire, you can't do this to me. Think about our image. Think about the legacy." "I am thinking about the legacy." "Grant," I said, my voice as cold as the bay outside. "That is why you are leaving. And before you think about going home to the penthouse, You should know that your mother signed a residency agreement when she moved in. Section 12, paragraph 4 states that the trust may terminate her occupancy immediately if her actions cause significant reputational harm to the Whitaker name. Stealing $7,500 for club fees and publicly slandering me in a lobby certainly qualifies. Grant looked like he was about to vomit. He reached into his pocket for his phone, likely to call Caleb Price, but I held up a hand. "Rafe," I said into the intercom. "Keep Mr. Holloway's access badge active for another 2 hours. I want him to feel like he still has a chance to fix this." Grant looked at me, confused. "What, I'm giving you a head start?" "Grant," I lied, knowing exactly what he would do. As soon as he left this room, he would run to a computer to try and hide the $92,000 trail to Juniper Consulting. He would dig his own grave deeper with every keystroke. After security escorted him out, Elena leaned in. "My media team just flagged a massive spike in bot activity. It looks like he's paying for another wave of attacks. 68% of the accounts are new. Should we block them?" "No," I replied. "Keep the silence. Let him spend the money. Let him commit the fraud in broad daylight. I want the trail to be undeniable." A notification chimed on my tablet. Rafe had sent a text. "Grant is setting up a tripod in his temporary office. He's going live in 10 minutes. He's going to tell his truth." "Let him talk," I said. "I need him to say the lies out loud. I need the court to hear them from his own mouth." I stood up and walked into the private dressing room attached to the office. I shed the beige cardigan and the stained blouse, dropping them onto the floor like a discarded skin. I pulled on a tailored black blazer and stepped into a pair of sharp, 4-inch heels. I looked in the mirror. I was no longer the broken wife. I was the CEO. But as I applied a fresh layer of lipstick, I made sure to leave the faint shadows under my eyes untouched. "You look ready," Elena said from the doorway. "Not yet," I whispered, looking at my reflection. "I still look like a woman who is fighting. I need to look like a woman who has already lost everything until the judge asks that one question." I watched the video on a loop, the blue light of the tablet reflecting in my eyes like a cold fire. Grant was sitting by a hospital bed, his hand clutching Sloane's. The lighting was dimmed, casting dramatic shadows that made him look 10 years older. Sloane was wearing a thick medical brace on her right wrist, her face pale and devoid of makeup. She looked like a broken doll. "I never thought it would come to this," Grant whispered to the camera, his voice thick with a rehearsed tremor. "I tried to protect Claire from her own demons, but she hired a professional to attack my colleague in broad daylight, just because of a paranoid delusion." Sloane let out a soft, jagged sob. I'm so scared to go back to work. I don't feel safe anywhere anymore." The video ended, and the comments section exploded. Within minutes, the hashtag Justice for Sloane was trending across every major platform. The internet had become a pack of wolves, and I was the meat. Elena leaned over my shoulder, tapping a graph on her laptop. "Look at the metadata. Claire," she said, her voice sharp. 68% of these accounts were created within the last 72 hours. It is a textbook bot farm. He is spending thousands of your own dollars to buy this outrage." The boardroom door swung open, and 3 members of the Whitaker Ridge Trust walked in. Their faces were grim. "Claire, this is a disaster," the chairman barked. "The brand sentiment has dropped 40 points since this morning. You need to issue a public apology immediately. Admit there was a misunderstanding and offer Sloane a settlement." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "An apology is an admission of guilt. I will not apologize for a crime I did not commit. If you want a settlement, you'll have to wait for the court to order it." By 9 o'clock that night, the battle moved to my front door. Rafe called me from the lobby of the penthouse. "Grant is here. Claire." He's trying to use his old key, and when that didn't work, he started kicking the door. He's making a scene for the neighbors' ring cameras. Call the police. "Rafe," I said calmly, "and make sure you have the deed ready." When I stepped into the hallway, 2 officers were already there, flanking a sweating, furious Grant. He was shouting about his rights and his home. I handed the lead officer the paperwork. This apartment is owned by the Whitaker Ridge Trust. "Officer," I said. "Mr. Holloway was a guest. His residency was terminated this afternoon following a violation of the Trust's moral turpitude clause. He has no legal right to be here." The officer checked the papers and turned to Grant. "Sir, you need to step away from the door. Now." I pointed to 2 black duffel bags sitting by the elevator. "I've already packed your essentials. Grant, you can find the rest of your things at the motel you've been frequenting." Grant's face turned a shade of red I had never seen. He lunged for the bags, but his eyes darted toward the laptop bag he had slung over his shoulder. He gripped it like it was a life jacket in a stormy sea. "You think you're so smart, Claire. You have no idea what's coming for you." As he was escorted out, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. It was a screenshot of a cloud storage login. "We have the cloud. We have all your little secrets. Sleep well." My skin crawled, but I didn't let my hands shake. I went back inside and sat with Elena. "He's desperate," she whispered. "He just received an email from an anonymous buyer offering $500,000 for the Atlas Vale project data. It's a Hail Mary. Claire. He needs the cash to keep his bot farm running." "Open the gate," I said. I watched the server logs in real time. Grant, using a burner phone from a motel room, accessed the Whitaker Ridge server. He bypassed the main folders and went straight for a directory I had planted 3 days ago. It was titled Private Don't Open. Inside that folder was a file that looked like a goldmine of trade secrets and personal confessions. In reality, it was a honeypot, a digital trap that would tag any device that downloaded it with a permanent, traceable signature. "He took it," Elena said, her eyes gleaming. "He just committed a federal crime. Why not call the authorities? Now." I looked at the picture of Grant and Sloan in the hospital, still circulating on the news. "No. If we arrest him now, he's a martyr. I want them to feel like they are winning. I want them to walk into that courthouse tomorrow morning believing they have the knife at my throat. I want them to lie under oath, in front of the world, before I ask that one question." I looked out at the lights of Crescent Harbor. The social media storm was still raging, but for the first time in 10 years, I felt perfectly, dangerously still. The motel was a relic of the 1970s, tucked away in a corner of the suburbs where the streetlights flickered with a dying hum. My investigators watched from a sedan across the street as Grant and Sloan moved their lives into a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap bleach. They were swapping SIM cards and hunched over burner phones like amateur criminals in a low-budget heist movie. It was a pathetic sight, seeing the man who once commanded boardrooms now hiding behind a polyester curtain. Sloan didn't waste any time. Using a crude template she found online, she fabricated a protection order against me. It was filled with legal jargon that didn't quite fit and a forged signature that looked like a shaky imitation of a local clerk. She posted a photo of it to her social media accounts, the caption dripping with feigned terror. "Elena, should we have the platform take it down?" Rafe asked over the secure line. "No," I replied, my voice flat. "Leave it. Every time someone shares that lie, they create a digital breadcrumb. We aren't just tracking the post, we are tracking the metadata of everyone who helps them spread it. Let her think she's winning the public. I want her to feel invincible." While Sloan played the victim online, Grant was busy trying to erase his tracks. He used an old, unauthorized tablet to bypass the secondary firewalls of the Atlas Vale accounting system. I watched his cursor move across my screen in real time. He was trying to delete the logs of the $92,000 transfers to Juniper Consulting. He didn't realize that the Whitaker Ridge servers used an immutable ledger system. He wasn't deleting anything. He was simply creating a permanent record of his attempt to destroy evidence. It was a digital confession, written in his own hand. He didn't stop there. Desperation has a specific scent, and Grant was reeking of it. He called the night attendant at our old penthouse, a young man named Marcus. Grant didn't know that Marcus had already signed a cooperation agreement with my legal team. "Look, Marcus," Grant's voice came through the recording, frantic and thin. "I just need you to say you saw her screaming at me. Tell them she threw a vase. I'll make it worth your while. $5,000. Cash. Tonight. I just need one witness." I closed my eyes for a second, listening to the man I once loved try to buy a lie. He was digging so deep he was bound to hit bedrock soon. Then came the final move of the night. The anonymous email I had authorized Elena to send reached Grant's inbox. It was an offer to buy the schematics and client lists for the new Atlas Vale project for $500,000. I saw the hesitation in his movements through the screen share. He paced the small motel room, glancing at Sloane, who was busy refreshing her follower count. Finally, he sat down and hit the upload button. He didn't just steal money anymore. He had just committed the federal crime of transporting stolen trade secrets. "We have him," Elena whispered, sitting across from me in my study. "But Claire, there is more." I went deeper into the approval logs for the Juniper transfers. Grant didn't act alone. She slid a tablet toward me. My heart, which I thought had turned to ice, felt a sudden, sharp tremor. Every transfer that exceeded $25,000 required a second signature. The digital certificate attached to those approvals didn't belong to Sloane. It belonged to Judith Holloway. My mother-in-law hadn't just been a witness to the theft. She was the architect of the authorization. "And we found this," Elena added, placing a high-resolution photo on the desk. It was a pawn shop receipt from a shop 3 towns over. It was for a sapphire ring. The name on the identification used for the transaction was Judith Holloway. I stared at the image of my mother's ring. The woman had sat at my dinner table, drank my wine, and called me family while she was pawning my history to pay for her son's mistress. "Are you okay?" Elena asked softly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the distant lights of the city. I didn't feel the rage I expected. I felt a strange, terrifying sense of clarity. "I don't need them to apologize, Elena," I said, my voice barely a whisper but heavy with intent. "I don't need them to feel guilty. I need them to sign. I want everything they have left." I turned back to her. "Finalize Plan Hushglass. Set the meeting at the Halcyon Meridian for tomorrow night. Tell them I am ready to negotiate a settlement. Make sure it sounds like I'm terrified. Give them the scent of money, and they will walk right into the cage. The trap was set. They were addicts for victory, and I was about to give them one last high before the floor dropped out." The conference room in Elena's private office had become a digital war room. Screens lined the walls, flickering with the cold, blue light of spreadsheets and server logs. Elena stood in the center, her sleeves rolled up, pointing at a visualization of the bot farm Grant had hired. "Every single one of those 98,000 comments has been traced back to 3 server clusters in Eastern Europe," Elena said, her voice tight with professional satisfaction. "We have the invoices from the shell company he used to pay for them. We even have the original video files of Sloane's attack before they were edited to make you look like the aggressor. The timestamps on their social media posts match his login history down to the second." I looked at the financial report lying on the table. It was thicker than a phone book. My forensic accountants had spent the last 48 hours digging through 3 years of records. The money wasn't just going to Juniper Consulting. It was flowing into 2 other Delaware-based entities I had never even heard of. The total amount stolen was far beyond the $92,000 I had first suspected. We were looking at nearly $4 million over 36 months. Grant's signing limit was $500,000 per quarter, I noted, my voice sounding hollow. How did he bypass the trust's internal controls for this much money? Elena slid a digital tablet toward me. He didn't bypass them. Claire. He had a cosigner. every single transfer that went over the limit was authorized by a secondary digital key. Your mother-in-law, Judith Holloway, signed off on every penny. They weren't just eating at your table. They were gutting your inheritance while they smiled at you over Sunday brunch. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My family had treated my father's legacy like a personal ATM. But the rot went even deeper. Elena revealed that their lawyer, Caleb Price, wasn't just a legal representative. He had signed a secret contingency contract with Grant. He was slated to receive 25% of any settlement they managed to squeeze out of me. It wasn't a legal defense. It was legalized extortion. Let them think they've won, I whispered. Rafe, is the cloud trap ready? It's live, Rafe replied from the corner of the room. We've set up a honey folder on a fake server. Grant has already installed a dead man's switch. He thinks that if you don't pay up, the switch will release your secrets to the press. But we've swapped the files. If he triggers that switch, he won't be sending out scandals. He'll be broadcasting a compressed file of every piece of evidence we've gathered tonight directly to the district attorney's office. I spent the next hour preparing my costume. I chose an oversized, soft cashmere sweater in a pale cream color that made my skin look sallow. I used a dark eyeshadow to deepen the circles under my eyes and skipped the lipstick entirely. I needed to look like a woman who was one breath away from a total nervous breakdown. I needed to be the broken wife they expected to see. Elena had booked 2 adjacent suites at the Halcyon Meridian Hotel. It was one of the most expensive venues in Crescent Harbor, the kind of place where people went to feel powerful. Behind the connecting wall of the main suite, 4 officers from the Economic Crimes Division and a senior prosecutor were already in position, their headsets on, recording every vibration in the air. Remember, I told the team as we prepared to leave, do not move in the moment they confess. I don't want them arrested in a hotel room. I want them to believe they have won. I want them to talk. I want them to brag about how easy it was to break me. The more they gloat, the more they seal their own fate. The final piece of the puzzle was a small, unassuming document Elena had just secured. It was an emergency court order allowing us to move for an immediate forensic audit of the metadata for any files they presented as evidence. To Grant and Caleb, it would look like a desperate, last-minute legal stall. In reality, it was the scalpel that would expose their forgeries in open court. I looked at my reflection in the elevator mirror of the Halcyon Meridian. I looked fragile. I looked defeated. I looked like a victim. But as the doors opened to the penthouse floor, my heart was beating with the steady, rhythmic precision of a ticking bomb. Are you ready? Elena whispered. I've been ready for 3 years, I said, my voice thin and trembling, perfectly in character. Let's go give them the victory they think they deserve. The suite at the Halcyon Meridian smelled of lilies and the metallic tang of expensive lies. Light from the Crescent Harbor skyline bled through the windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the velvet furniture. Grant and Sloane walked in like they were arriving at an awards ceremony, their faces glowing with the sickening radiance of people who believed they had already won. Grant didn't even take off his coat. He stood in the center of the room, his eyes scanning for a briefcase or a bank draft. "Where is the money?" Claire Grant asked, his voice stripping away any pretense of affection. "I am not here for small talk or a walk down memory lane." "Where is the check?" I sat in a low armchair, clutching the edges of my cream-colored sweater. I made sure my hands were trembling just enough for him to see. I just want this to be over. Grant, I can't breathe with those people outside my door. I just want peace. Please." A shadow moved from the hallway. Caleb Price stepped into the room, his silk suit shimmering under the chandelier. He wore a smile that belonged on a shark. "I am here as a neutral witness to ensure this settlement is handled with professional care. Claire, we don't want any more misunderstandings." Sloane sat on the edge of the mahogany table, swinging her leg. "The price has gone up, darling. $25 million was the morning price. Given the damage your silence has caused to my reputation today, we are looking at $35 million. Immediate transfer. Before I could answer, Grant's phone buzzed with a FaceTime request. He clicked it, and Judith's face appeared on the screen, her features distorted by greed and spite. "Has she signed yet?" Judith shrieked from the speaker. "Don't let that girl manipulate you." Grant. That money was always ours by right anyway. I spent 30 years waiting for this family to have what it deserves. I leaned forward, my voice thin and fragile. How did we get here? How did it become about the money? Was the video? Was it really necessary? And the bots? I don't understand how you found so many people to hate me in 72 hours. Sloane laughed, a sharp, jagged sound. You really are naive, aren't you? I have people in 3 different time zones who specialize in shifting the narrative. It took one afternoon and a few $1,000s to make you the most hated woman in the city. It was easy. So easy. Grant paced the room, his chest puffing out. And don't think you can find a paper trail. Claire. I wiped the internal books at Atlas Vale last night. There is no Juniper Consulting anymore. There is only a hole where your evidence used to be. You have nothing but a ruined name and a very expensive checkbook. Caleb Price slid a thick stack of papers onto the coffee table. Sign here, Claire. Once the ink is dry, the bot farm stops, the protection order is retracted, and everything becomes legal. It is a clean break. I picked up a sleek, black smart pen from the table. It was a digital device that synced every stroke to a cloud server in real time. I looked at the signature line, then back at them. You are sure these statements you made to the press are what you want to stand by? Every word, Sloane snapped. Now sign the damn paper. I signed. I watched Grant's eyes light up as he reached for the document. He didn't bother reading the fine print in Section 9, where they had just confirmed that every public statement made regarding my violence and the protection order was true and accurate to their knowledge. By signing, they had just notarized their own extortion and perjury. Grant reached for his phone to check the transfer. All right. Where is the check? I stood up. I didn't tremble. I didn't look down. I pulled the oversized sweater tight and looked Grant Holloway straight in his hollow eyes. The fragile mask I had worn for 3 days shattered, replaced by a cold, predatory stillness. I didn't bring a check. Grant, I said, my voice dropping an octave and losing every trace of fear. I brought a recording. The door to the adjoining suite clicked open. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, led by a woman with a gold badge clipped to her belt. Grant froze. The document still in his hand. Sloane's face turned the color of ash. Grant Holloway, Sloane Bishop, and Caleb Price. The lead prosecutor said, holding up a warrant. I am the Special Assistant District Attorney. We have a court order for the immediate seizure of all your electronic devices. We've been listening to every word of your confession for the last 30 minutes. Grant looked at me, his mouth working but no sound coming out. Claire, you can't, I can, I said, walking toward the door. But I'm not going to let them take you to jail tonight. The prosecutor has agreed to let you stay in that motel for 1 more night. I want you to have time to think about what you've done. Grant grabbed my arm. Why wait? I leaned in, my breath cold against his ear. Because I want you to walk into that courtroom tomorrow morning believing you still have a chance. I want the judge to see your face when she sees the metadata. I want the world to watch you fall in high definition. I walked out of the suite without looking back, leaving them in a room full of federal agents and the sudden, suffocating realization that they had just signed their own death warrants. The storm arrived at 8 o'clock the following morning, exactly as I had anticipated. Grant and Caleb Price had spent the last 24 hours doubling down on their narrative of victimhood. They filed an emergency motion for a permanent protection order against me, coupled with a request to freeze a significant portion of the Whitaker Ridge Trust's liquid assets. Caleb's strategy was transparent but effective for the cameras. He was framing me as a billionaire, using her inheritance as a weapon to crush a helpless family who only wanted the truth. Judith was in her element. She had spent the afternoon mobilizing a local nonprofit group she'd funded for years, putting people on the courthouse steps with professionally printed signs. Justice for the Holloways and wealth is not a shield flashed across the morning news. The story was being packaged for the masses. The rich, abusive wife crushing the simple family of the man she once promised to cherish. I watched the live streams from the back of my car, the social media vitriol reaching a fever pitch. Elena didn't blink. She filed our official response at 11 o'clock that night. We included the metadata from the initial lobby video, the server logs showing the motel IP addresses, and a heavily redacted transcript of the meeting at the Halcyon Meridian. We didn't reveal the full recordings or the smart pen signatures yet. We only gave Judge Maren Klein enough breadcrumbs to lead her to the forest, ensuring she would be the one to ask for more. Sloane Bishop was prepared to play her final card, the hospital records. Her legal team intended to use her alleged wrist injury as the ultimate proof of my violence. I sat in my study, looking at the subpoena Elena had quietly secured for the clinic's original digital intake logs. We knew the doctor had never actually examined her. We knew the medical brace had been purchased at a local pharmacy for $29. I kept that card face down on the table, waiting for the moment she would lie under oath. Then, Elena found the thread that would unravel Caleb Price himself, hidden deep within one of the emails they submitted as evidence of my threatening behavior. There was a digital fingerprint. When Elena ran the forensics, it showed the file had been modified 3 times on a device registered to Caleb's law firm. He wasn't just representing a liar, he was manufacturing the lies. Elena circled the IP address in bright red on our private file. "We wait for the judge to find it herself," she whispered. "It's more lethal that way." I decided on my final appearance with surgical care. I wore a soft, charcoal-colored wrap dress that seemed to swallow my frame, making me look smaller than I was. I used a pale foundation to make my skin look translucent, like a woman who hadn't slept for 100 hours. Rafe stayed 50 feet behind me at all times as we arrived at the courthouse. I didn't want a single person to be able to say I was using my security to intimidate anyone. The night before the hearing, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Grant. "Tomorrow you will be publicly humiliated. I hope you enjoy the view from the bottom. Claire." I stared at the screen for a long minute. I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, almost clinical sense of finality. I typed back a single sentence. "Tomorrow you will hear a question." The morning of the trial was a blurred montage of camera flashes and screaming. As I stepped out of the SUV, the crowd surged against the police barricades. "Monster," someone yelled from the front row. "How much did you pay for that fake smile?" "Claire." I kept my breathing steady, counting to 4 with every step. I didn't look at the cameras. I didn't look at Judith, who was standing at the top of the stairs like a grieving queen. I just walked. I had written the ending to this story weeks ago. Today was just the public reading. The heavy oak doors of the courtroom swung open, and the temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. We took our seats. Grant sat across the aisle, leaning back with a smug, oily confidence, whispering something into Sloane's ear. Sloane dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, her medical brace positioned perfectly for the gallery to see. Caleb Price stood up, adjusting his silk tie as if he were preparing to give a speech at the Oscars. Then, Judge Maren Klein entered the room. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at the gallery. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked straight at Caleb Price. There was a look in her eyes that made the air in the room feel thin, a look that suggested she had already smelled the rot beneath his expensive cologne. The silence was absolute. The trap was about to be sprung. The tension in the courtroom was a living thing, thick enough to taste. Caleb Price stood before the bench with the arrogance of a man who believed he had already won. He laid out his evidence like a royal flush, the edited video of my supposed assault, the color-printed protection order, and a matte black USB drive he claimed contained leaked files of my financial crimes. Grant sat beside him, the picture of a man broken by the woman he loved, dabbing at his eyes. In the front row, Judith nodded in silent approval, her eyes gleaming with the triumph of a queen mother. I sat motionless, my head bowed just enough to let my hair shield my face. To the gallery and the live stream cameras, I looked like a woman on the verge of a total collapse. Beside me, Elena didn't say a word. She simply reached into her briefcase and placed a single, thin manila envelope on the table. She didn't open it. She just left it there, a silent bomb waiting for the right moment. Judge Marin Klein picked up the printed protection order. She flipped through the first 3 pages with clinical speed, but then her hand stopped at the corner of the final page. She leaned in, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. The silence in the room stretched for 5, 10, 15 seconds. When she finally looked up, her gaze didn't go to me. It went straight to Caleb Price. The air in the room didn't just feel thin, it felt electric. Mr. Price, before we go any further, I have a curiosity that I'm sure you can satisfy, the judge said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. Explain to this court why this document was notarized by an individual whose commission expired on December 14th, 2024. And while you are at it, explain why the metadata of the digital copy you uploaded to our system indicates the IP address originated from your firm's private network at 2 o'clock this morning. Caleb Price went ashen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Grant shifted in his seat, his hand going to his throat as if he were suddenly struggling to breathe. Your Honor, there must be a technical error with the server. Caleb stammered, his voice trembling. Judith gripped her designer handbag so hard her knuckles turned white. The 3 of them were frozen, caught in the sudden, blinding glare of a legal spotlight they never saw coming. There is no error. Mr. Price, Judge Klein snapped. She looked toward the bailiff. I am ordering the immediate seizure of all primary devices at the plaintiff's table. Now. Before Caleb could object, the side doors of the courtroom opened. The special assistant district attorney, whom Elena had been coordinating with since our meeting at the Halcyon Meridian, stepped forward. Your Honor, the people wish to intervene. We have reason to believe we are witnessing the active commission of document forgery and evidence tampering. Elena finally opened the manila envelope. She didn't just present documents, she laid out a roadmap to their funeral. Your Honor, we have the original recordings from the Halcyon Meridian where the plaintiffs admitted to hiring bot farms, attempting to delete immutable server logs, and fabricating this very protection order. We also have the recorded phone calls of Mr. Holloway attempting to bribe building security for false testimony. The judge's eyes turned to Sloane Bishop. Ms. Bishop, your counsel has submitted a medical report claiming a severe wrist injury. However, we have a subpoenaed response from that clinic stating you were never seen on that date. Would you like to explain your perjury now? Or later, Sloane let out a choked, terrified sob. Grant told me it would be fine, he said. He said you'd never find out Grant's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He reached under the table, his thumb pressing frantically on his phone. He was triggering his dead man's switch, his final attempt to leak my secrets to the press and burn me down with him. But as he looked at the screen, his eyes went wide. The files being uploaded weren't my secrets. They were the honeypot files we had planted a comprehensive, self-signed confession of his own trade secret theft and wire fraud. No, that is not. What is happening? Grant gasped, his voice thin and breathless. Judge Klein's gavel came down with a sound like a gunshot. The motion for a protection order is dismissed with prejudice. I am referring the matter of Mr. Holloway, Ms. Bishop, and Mr. Price to the district attorney for immediate prosecution for forgery, extortion, and perjury. I am also ordering a total freeze on all assets linked to Juniper Consulting and an investigation into the fiduciary role of Judith Holloway. The room erupted as the bailiffs moved in and the metallic click of handcuffs echoed against the marble walls. I stood up. I didn't say a word to the man who had tried to steal my life. I didn't look at the mother-in-law who had pawned my mother's ring. I simply adjusted my blazer, looked the judge in the eye with a nod of respect, and walked out. I stepped onto the courthouse steps. The cameras were still there, but the headlines were already changing. I took a deep breath of the cold Crescent Harbor air. The one question had ended it all. I was finally free. Thank you so much for listening to this journey of betrayal and justice. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and let me know where in the world you are listening from today. It is always wonderful to connect with this community and hear your thoughts on these stories. If you enjoyed this finale, please subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and consider hitting the hype button to help this story reach more listeners who enjoy a good comeback. See you in the next story.